So today what I'm going to do is show you how to add other constraints. I'm assuming that you already know how to add uniqueness constraints like these ones. We've done that in a previous database. So I've got this, and now we're going to talk about some other constraints. Now other constraints include things like value and frequency constraints. And the wonderful thing about these constraints is it helps us determine some more data regarding our database and our universe of discourse. So let's think about some value constraints. What we have here is student, subject, so they're studying that subject, they have a name, and they also belong to a PC code, to a PC. Notice they can only belong to one PC. They also have a gender. Now there are only really two genders that we have in this database. We're just assuming that, and so we can add a constraint to that to say what they are. That's called a value constraint because we're constraining what values can be stored there. Now to add a value constraint to an entity, we select the entity and then right click on it and go to properties, and you'll come up with the object type properties box that you'll have seen before, and under here we have the definition, so that's gender, the reference mode, so that's code. We can go through and play with all this stuff. Most of it's not going to be of any interest to you, but further down, so we press these arrows, we come down to value. Now this is what we want. Now we can, for example, if it was a number thing and we wanted it linked to only between 1 and 10, we can do that and we get that one. Now that's not very useful for us because what we want is male or female. So I'll do that again. We go to each of these down here to value, and we want male, so it'll be M, and I click on add, and then female, so we put in an F down here and click on add. Now if, for example, I accidentally put in an erroneous one, I can actually then just select the one in here and press delete. So now you'll see that that's updated over here. Obviously that doesn't look very nice. We tend to like having them in the bottom right. So what we can do then is come across to where it says graphics, the graphics tab, click on that tab and then choose where we want it from any of these four places. Obviously I like the lower right, so I'm going to put it there. I can choose auto size or not. Now I've changed my size of my entity there, but that happens. Now I can set that as default so it stays as well. Okay, so that's that one. Now, what other values can we constrain? Well, we don't actually have any other values that we want to constrain. But what we do have is up here with the student studying a subject, we want to be able to say that they have to study between 5 and 7 subjects. If they don't study 5 subjects, then they're in breach of our enrollment policy. If they study more than 7, then they're too busy. So what we can do is that's actually going to apply to the student studying a subject. So we can right click on the role, because it's a role that's got the constraint, and go to edit selected fact. Now this is a frequency constraint because that says that this role can only be played a certain number of times. So it's a frequency at which the role can be played. That's why we add it to the role. And under here you'll see the constraint questions. They may or may not be you may or may not be used to those, but this button here is the one that we use to add a frequency constraint. Select the frequency constraint to edit, or press new to create a new one. Well, we don't have one, so we're going to create a new one, and we want the role in this constraint. It's going to be defined for the student, and we're going to say that they have to do at least a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 7. Note that it must be 1 or greater. Obviously this can only be played once, this one over here with the uniqueness constraint of a 1 to many, that's what it says. This one's a many to many, so that's why we can define it 5 to 7 times. We press OK, and you'll notice that once we update, it'll come up here. So now we have 5 to 7 there. Now we may also want to limit the number of students who can be in a subject. Say for example, we like student there to not be, let's just go back in there, edit selected fact. Say for example we want to limit our class sizes to 25 or less. We can click on there, and now we can say subject and set it to 25. Sorry, we want the maximum to be 25 and the minimum is going to be 1. Obviously we could say we won't run a class if it's less than that, so we can say 8 and then update that, and you'll see that it goes there. So that's how we add the frequency constraint. So again, to add a value constraint, the curly braces one here, click on the entity you're going to add it to, go to properties, across to value and type it in here. We can do a range like I showed you before. If we're going to do frequency constraints, we click on the role, go to edit selected fact, and then come across to constraints and choose this button here. Then we can edit, delete, whatever. Notice that we've got a lovely little graphic there that tells you which one it's on. So that's nice as well. They did actually think that through quite well. So I hope that's helped you with the constraints. Next time we're going to look at some mandatory constraints and applying those.